Good evening, everyone. I know this is the last session. First of all, thank you all for joining today, both in person and online. Okay. So today I'm going to talk about ICH M13A guidance and its implications on the BE assessment, specifically focusing on the high-risk products and non-high-risk products. Let's skip the slide, standard disclaimer. So the learning objectives or outline of my today's talk is I'll provide an overview of ICH M13A guidance with respect to the scope and objective of this guidance. And then I'll jump into the FDA's framework that we have established in classifying these solid oral dosage forms, whether it's a high-risk or non-high-risk products. I'll also explain the bioequivalence study recommendations that we have provided for these products. And at the end, I'll highlight some of the case studies showing the impact of this ICH M13 guidance on the ANDA assessment, specifically with related to bioequivalence. So ICH M13A guidance, this is the significant step forward in harmonizing the bioequivalence study approaches across the various agencies, specifically for solid oral immediate release dosage forms. So we all may have seen this guidance. It classifies or it provides binary classification for the drug products as high-risk products and non-high-risk products. What are high-risk products? These are the drug substances which specifically, let's say, low-soluble, combined with the formulation complexity or the manufacturing processes that may lead into differences in the bioequivalence outcome when compared with the varying GA conditions. That is, if you compare with a fasting study versus fed study, where in the sense that if you show bioequivalence in fasting study, it may not always be possible to extrapolate this results to the fed conditions as based on the differences in the test and RLD formulations. So if it's not a high-risk product, the other one is a non-high-risk product with the predictable outcomes where the drug may be highly soluble and there are no complex formulations or manufacturing designs. Now, when ICH M13 also provides the outline of once you know what the risk classification, what BE studies have to be conducted to demonstrate bioequivalence for these kind of products. So let's begin with, in this slide, I'll show the framework that FDA has established in classifying, determining the risk category for the drug products. So first, the biopharmaceutics properties of the drug, taking into account the solubility and the BCS class, as this tells us information on how drug behaves in various GI conditions. Then moving on to the complexity, whether it's coming from the formulation design itself together with the manufacturing processes. Some of them are highlighted here, like solid dispersions, microemulsions, or nanotechnologies that may have significant impact on the food effect modulation or solubility or in vivo PK performance. The other aspect we also look at is the critical excipients that the formulation may have. Specifically, we start with the RLD product because that's the information that's available for the agency at the initial stage. And if the RLD formulation has any critical excipients, like, for example, surfactants, solubility enhancers, anything that can affect the in vivo PK performance, we take that into account in classifying the drug product. Last but not least, the dosing instructions that are provided in the RLD label with respect to whether it has to be taken with the food or if there is significant food effect based on the RLD product or the magnitude of food interaction. All these properties are considered in first classifying the drug product, whether it's a high risk or a non-high risk. Now moving on to BE study conditions. So ICH M13A guidance provides recommendations for us on what type of studies have to be conducted once you categorize or classify these drug products into high risk and non-high risk products. So let's start with non-high risk products. Like I said, these are simple products in the sense of solubility wise or the formulation design wise or manufacturing process wise. So the typical recommendation is to do one study, most generally, we recommend fasting study because fasting condition often provides sensitive formulation differences, if ever exist between test and RLD formulations. However, which I don't want to go into detail, but if you look into the ICH M13A guidance, there is also alternate instead of fasting studies, sometimes FED study is recommended if there are safety considerations or if there are significant PK variabilities or PK performance improvement. In such cases, instead of fasting study, we may recommend FED study, but it's all case by case. Now moving on to high-risk products, both fasting and FED-B studies are recommended for these products. As I stated before for the previous slide, the reason is that if ever there are any formulation differences that are obtained between test and RLD formulations, fasting study alone may not tell you how it behaves this product similarly or differently under the FED condition, under varying GI conditions. That's why the FED study is recommended to ensure that in all the conditions, the test product demonstrates bioequivalence with the RLD product and the switchability is not a concern. So now we have this ICH M13A guidance is implemented in 2024. Since then, what is FDA is doing? Based on this guidance, now we have classified the products as high risk and non-high risk. Now we are revising a lot of drug products based on this risk classification. So the previously already posted PSG recommendations were revised. They revisited to see what is the category. And if it's a non-high risk products, in the past, based on the PK endpoint guidance, we used to recommend fasting and FED study. Now moving on to single study of mostly fasting, but again, depending upon the safety considerations. However, for high-risk products, we continue to recommend both fasting and FED-B studies. One point I want to make is FDA is always open for alternate approaches. And if there are any significant advances in the scientific technologies, we adopt that. And we encourage applicants also to demonstrate if there is scientific rationale behind alternate approaches. One advancement I want to highlight here is repotrectinib tablets. Our initial classification is this is a high-risk product. As such, 3 studies are recommended for the both low strength and higher strength together. Fasting condition, FED condition on higher strength, and fasting on the lower strength. However, there is also alternate approach provided for this. In the case that FED condition study can be waived if in case fasting study is acceptable, and the dissolution shows similarities between the test and RLD products. And the most important is comparison of the qualitative and quantitative way formulations between test and RLD, specifically if there are critical excipients, because we are aware that this RLD formulation has solubilizing agents. So we want to make sure that the test formulation is similar to RLD formulation, so the risk of bioequivalence under FED condition is minimal. So with that background, with that information on the ICH M13 guidance, now I want to move on to the case studies. I want to make a note here that these are hypothetical cases, and any data I'm showing is the mock data. So the case studies highlight the importance of ICH M13 guidance and how it gets implemented during the BE assessment when the ANDA submissions are received. Let's go into the first one. So this is a class 4 drug, which is a low soluble drug and low permeable drug. And the RLD label indicates that the food has no influence on the extent of absorption of drug. That means the product can be taken with or without regards to the food. And when we looked at the RLD formulation, the initial process where which we go on the risk classification, this is a non-complex formulation, or no complex methodologies are involved in manufacturing this RLD product. Based on this initial risk assessment, we have classified this as a non-high risk product, and as such, only fasting BE study is recommended in the PSG. Let's say we received an ANDA, and during the generic drug development, the ANDA applicant tried to develop 2 formulations to see how they behave, and the 2 formulations differ in the polymer that is utilized in making amorphous solid dispersion. First of all, I want to make a point here that RLD formulation is simple. However, when it came to the test product, it involves complex methodologies. This is an amorphous solid dispersion. So the two polymers are pH-dependent polymer 1, and the other one is pH-independent polymer. As you can see in this slide, the dissolution profile, that's the first comparison to be made. When they're made with the RLD product, there is significant differences in the dissolution profile between the test and RLD. And also the point is there's differences between the two formulations that generic drug manufacturer is trying to develop. And the question that comes now is how this translates in vivo performance. How this difference, if ever these dissolution differences, can have significant impact in vivo. So pilot studies are conducted in this case, which is less than 20 subjects. And I understand this is a busy slide, but what I want to convey the message is that depending upon the formulation they choose, pH dependent or pH independent, the BE outcomes are varying. And not only that, the fasting study is not predictable of the fed study. The results are varying between the formulation and also between the condition. Again, this is going to the point that together with the drug substance properties, in this case, this is a crystalline form which has low solubility, and that complex methodologies are involved. So the food formulation interaction may vary between the test and RLD. So it points that fed condition, fed study is important in these cases, in these products. So for this ANDA submission, even though initial classification is a non-high risk, but based on the test product, this is considered as a high-risk product. As such, both fasting and fed BE studies were submitted. So let's go to the case 2 study. So this is a fixed dose combination product. It has two APIs. First API is a highly soluble. I did not mention it here, but I want to highlight the second API, which is a class 2 drug, which has a pH-dependent solubility. Again, the RLD labeling states that food has no influence on the exposure of both the drugs, and this can be taken with regards to the food. The recommendation that comes in the RLD label is based on the RLD formulation characteristics, because they might be excipients that may modulate the food effect. So the RLD formulation has complex methodology, which is amorphous solid dispersion. So based on this, our initial risk assessment is this is a high-risk product, and as such, we recommended both fasting and fed BE studies in the PSG. Now, ANDA came in-house, but at the time of submission of this ANDA, there is no PSG. So the generic manufacturer is unaware of the PSG, the BE study recommendations. However, based on their test product formulation characteristics, they've conducted fasting BE study, but in case of fed BE study, they proposed an alternative approaches of modeling data. They also understand that their formulation is complex, so fed BE study is needed for this. However, they proposed alternate approaches. So as I mentioned before, FDA is always open and encourage applicants to provide alternate approaches only with proper scientific, rational, and validation to show that the fed study, under whatever data they provided, they can actually show that there is no differences between the test and RLD performance in vivo. In this case, we did accept, in the sense the methodology modeling data is considered. However, there are some deficiencies related to this modeling data. So a letter was sent out to address those if in case they want to choose this alternate approach pathway, or alternatively conduct a fed BE study to show or to demonstrate the bioequivalence between both the products. So now let's move on to the third case study, which is my final case study for today's talk. This is a class 4 drug. It has low solubility, low permeability, and the RLD labeling does indicate that food has no effect on the drug bioavailability, and the product can be taken without regards to the food. Now, the RLD product has critical excipient, which is a pH modifier. I want to make a note here that having just one pH modifier or solubilizing agent, we do not consider it as a high-risk product. However, if the magnitude of the food interaction or together with the properties of the drug substance and the methodology, we may consider it as a high-risk product. Initial classification, we made it as a non-high-risk product, but finally, based on the data that we have received during ANDAs, the classification was changed to high-risk product. Now, if we see the current PSC for this drug product recommends both fasting and Fed-BE studies. In the next few slides, I'll go through the scientific rationale, how this recommendation came into. So we received an ANDA submission. There's no complex formulation. There's no complex manufacturing method, and also there are no pH modifiers in the formulation. So the applicant submitted both fasting and Fed-BE studies. The fasting BE study passed, whereas the Fed-BE study failed. Now FDA recommended the applicant to conduct the Fed-BE study as well, and also reformulate their test product because of the IIG limits and other purposes. So we looked at the ANDAs that were submitted across in-house that we have received for this drug product. So we have made based on that few observations. So generic formulations, if contains pH modifiers, pH adjusters, then consistently we saw fasting and Fed-BE studies being passed. However, if the generic formulations do not contain pH modifiers, then it exhibited not only inconsistent food effects, the PK variability also varied depending upon the formulation, and also there is no consistent pattern in the acceptance or the passing or failing of the Fed-BE studies. So based on this, we understood that pH modifiers are playing a significant role in the in vivo performance, specifically under the Fed condition. So together with the RLD information that we have available, that RLD contains pH control agents for the stability enhancement and the PK variability that we have observed across all the generic formulations with respect to the differences in the formulation, specifically for the critical excipient, and based on the inconsistent food effects, now the current PSC recommendation is to have both fasting and Fed-BE studies. So with that, I want to summarize. The key takeaways is that the ICH M13A guidance for the non-high-risk products, typically a bioequivalence study recommendation is based on a single study and mostly fasting, whereas for the high-risk products, it necessitates both fasting and Fed-BE studies. I want to make a note also here that the initial risk assessment that FDA makes, whether it's a high-risk or non-high-risk product, is based on the available information of the RLD labeling, RLD formulation characteristics, and the biopharmaceutics properties of the drug substance. However, once the ANDA is received in-house, we also evaluate the generic formulation. If the generic formulation has any complex methodologies, as I have described in previous slides, or we think that there is a magnitude food effect or food interaction is significant, then we also recommend fasting and Fed-BE studies in such case. And again, I want to reiterate the point that PSGs are guidances. They are not requirements, and applicants can propose alternate approaches. However, there should be a strong scientific rationale behind these approaches if any in vitro is provided in lieu of conducting any in vivo studies. With that, I conclude my talk, and I would like to thank our OB office management, Dr. Partha Rai, who is in house room today, and Dr. Bingley, along with my division management, Dr. April Brady, Dr. Kiran, Dr. Ezang, and all the BESSs who have provided me these case study examples. With that, thank you all for your attention. Now I will hand it over to Dr. Yanglu. Thank you.